by Jonathan Shargrave, SecondsOut, joined today by Paddy Fitzpatrick, trainer George Groves, along with other things of course, but for this event specifically, how's George feeling ahead of the fight on Saturday? He's
feeling excellent. It's been a great camp, been a very, very positive camp, and we're looking forward to getting out. He wanted to get out before Christmas, so it was either going to be on his own promotion, and then Eddie Hearn called and said he'd like him on this one, so it made sense, and here we are.
Lovely. I mean, can I ask you, obviously since you've teamed up with George, I know you'd had dealings in the past where you'd done bits and bobs with him and what have you, but since you've teamed up with him full time, has it been could you describe it as a bit of a whirlwind? Because obviously you've been involved in two absolutely epic fights, and then obviously you're hoping going into next year you're going to be involved in some more.
I can't say it's been a whirlwind, no. Just purely because my job isn't anything got to do with what goes on in the public eye. My job is to go in the gym, prepare him for a fight, show up and direct him while he's taking part in that fight. So where it takes part in, whether it's in 100 people or 80,000 people, doesn't kind of make a difference to me. So it hasn't really been a whirlwind. He's had 4 fights in a year, which is it's nice that he's been busy. But no, his career has certainly spiraled up very quickly in the last year. But for us, it's just preparing for a fight.
But that must take, obviously that's probably testament to yourself that you're able to block out and not get swept up by the kind of furore that surrounded George for the last year, certainly. Is it fair to say that your profile as well, obviously as a trainer, because you've been more in the public eye, has risen though since you teamed up with George?
No, people don't want to know me. They recognise me a bit because I'm with George. George, it's the fighter that people want to know. So, the fact that I work with him, I'm around him when he is getting attention. I get a little bit by default. But no, my job has been the same as it was before. And I hope it continues the same way, where I'm in the gym doing my thing in there, and that's it. I'm cool with that.
And can I ask you about, obviously, yourself as a personality, all the videos I've seen of you and every interview, what have you, you're evidently a very zen-like character. You're very calm and composed. Right. Do you drink a lot of chamomile tea, or is that just your personality and how you like to approach things? Is it hard to rile you up?
I'm 45, so I'm hoping as I get older that I'm learning more about myself and how to control myself. I can't testify that I was always so calm, but I would like to think that I've learned from my mistakes as I make them, and when to open my mouth and when to keep it shut. So, am I easy to rile up? I try to keep my composure. I suppose I'm the same as anybody else. I'd have a point when I wouldn't, but it takes quite a lot.
Yeah, because I think it would be fair to say, obviously, I think we saw maybe more vocal side of you after the first fight with Froch. Obviously,
in what way?
In the sense that I think you obviously felt the injustice as well, and you were happy to vocalise that, obviously, in a campaign to get that rematch. But I don't know.
I wouldn't agree with that. I had something different to say. I don't call people to do interviews, because like I said, there is no one interested in me, they're interested in George. But when somebody asks me to do an interview, I'll answer the questions that they ask me. So the questions I was asked after the first fight with Carol, I had obviously not general answers to give, and I gave my answer and my view about what I believe happened. And that's exactly what we did with the IBF petition as well. We put together a very articulate petition. We put together a DVD. We put together reports from 2 psychologists. And it wasn't about beating the drums, it was about going and presenting that professionally and getting our point across in a way that they'd be willing to sit and listen to it. Because if we went just shouting and banging on the table saying we had an injustice, I think they would close their ears to us until we left and then say good riddance to them. So we had to present it in a way that they wanted to listen to it. But I wouldn't have said I was more vocal, I just answered the questions that were asked of me.
Okay. And I wanted to ask about obviously George's career since the Froch fight. I mean, it's obviously been well documented. It was a hard loss. Some people felt in his comeback fight against Rabras, I know you thought the performance was good, and me as an observer, I thought it was a good performance, but I've heard some people say that it wasn't a great performance.
Who, like James and Carl?
Possibly. Not, maybe people aren't impartial.
Can you tell me when they gave him compliments?
I mean, okay, maybe the criticism levelled at him was that maybe he was too easy to hit that night or what have you. Would you say now the psychological effects of the rematch have been completely dusted off? And then do you think we will see the George Groves, for example, that we saw in the first fight against Froch, who was sort of sensational at times?
I thought that you saw in his last 3 fights 3 different George Groves. You saw a very aggressive one in the first Carl fight because that was a game plan. You saw a George that boxed and was methodical in the second one. You saw in the third fight a George who set the pace early and kept the pressure with that pace, and that was what we planned to do. And that was 3 different George Groves, and you'll see a different one this time. You'll see him with certain pieces set up for a southpaw and to take advantage of what we know we have in front of us. George is developing fight by fight the way every fighter should. He's a lot of experience over the last 14 months that he's come through, and now he knows what he's capable of. He knows that he can handle the pressure of 80,000 people. He knows that he's able to manage himself, look after his own affairs and his business, and do a great job of it. So with every camp he has, and he grows and gets better at it. So he's in a good place right now.
And is there any concern? I know George, like you mentioned there, his own affairs. I suppose if we elaborate on that, we know now that he's starting to look after a couple of fighters. Maybe has quite an integral role in how his maybe fights are promoted and what have you. Are these worrying for you as a trainer in terms of distractions, or do you think it's a positive distraction to help him outside the gym as well?
I think it would be a negative distraction if he had people in place that were there to do that job and he was still trying to be involved when he doesn't need to be. There's no point in hiring a man to do something for you and then doing the job yourself. Yeah. He's in a position where he manages himself, and therefore he needs to be involved in what a manager gets involved in. I think he's got a great balance. He hasn't taken on any of these roles just to keep himself busy, man. He's taken them on because he wants everything done correct. He wants it done the way he feels it should be done. Yeah. So it doesn't take away from his focus or anything else. I find as a team together, myself and the father and him every day in the gym is growing better and better because we understand each other more. We're getting more from him. He's giving more to us. So no, I don't think it has a negative influence. No.
And obviously, just to finish up, Paddy, I appreciate your time. The fight with, I would say the rematch, but we know he fought in the amateurs as well. The fight with James DeGale is something that you'll have been inundated with, I'm sure, in interviews. It's quite evident that that's what the boxing public and certainly that the promoters are gearing up towards next year. Some sort of showdown. Obviously, we hope as British fight fans that it involves 2 world titles. When that fight, if and when that fight does materialise, George has beaten him twice, as I say, once in the amateurs and obviously once as a pro. You're obviously inherently confident that it'll be repeat rather than revenge, won't it?
Is that a question?
That's a question,
That's a question. I expect George to win if and when they meet again. That's not to take anything away from James. I'm sure that James expects himself to make an adjustment and win the next time they meet. Yeah. James believes that he won the second one. That's all well and good. I have no problem with George fighting any of the top super middleweights. It's funny that you say people are talking about James a lot. I talk to other people and they're talking about Callum Smith a lot. Yeah. I talk to other reporters and they're actually talking about George and Carl a third time. It's kind of nice, I said to George, that you don't even have a world title yet and everybody seems to want to fight you. Yeah. So you're in a pretty good position, and it's nothing to be upset about when people are calling you out when that's what you do for a living.
And without asking you to reveal anything, I'm sure it's something you've probably mulled over, during time away and when you have time to think, but would you essentially be looking to reflect or duplicate the style he fought in the first fight with DeGale? in order to beat him again, or have you seen things in De Gale since that fight in which he's improved, and obviously you would have to make adjustments as well?
I would wait until they're fighting again and then look at how both men are acting at that time and how both men are performing at that time, and then come up with a plan based on that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go into any fight and say let's do the exact same thing again. I think you noticed that between the first and the second Carl fight.
No.
Some people might think we should have done what we did in the first fight in the second fight, but we didn't believe we should have, and bar the shot that landed, I think we proved going in with a different game plan. The second fight was still working because he was still winning the rounds, putting them in the bank. So, you make your mind up on the game plan if and when that's needed. They might never fight. Both men have to win Saturday night.
True. And do you say obviously James believes he won the first fight. How close did you think it actually was?
I was confident that George won it.
Right.
That's all I'll say. I was confident he won it, and he got the result of it, so it seems I had the right opinion.
Okay, yeah. And just, you mentioned there the trilogy fight with Carl Froch. How feasible do you think that is? I mean, in your heart of hearts, do you think it's realistic that it'll ever come to fruition?
Well, I think if Carl is still around, I see no reason why it wouldn't come to fruition. If George comes back here with a WBC belt around his waist, the public are the people that demand the big fights. It's getting yourself in a mandatory position. It's promoters making deals with each other that put together the ordinary fights. But the big fights, they're made by the public. No, we don't care what G1, we want to see this. And if they demand something enough, and one side is willing to do it, then it's up to the other side to say yes or no, isn't it? And George would not turn down a fight with any man if it makes sense, and he certainly wouldn't turn down a fight with Carl because he would like to do what he believes that he can do, which is beat him. And I believe he can beat him too. I believe he's already shown that in 2 fights. What he has shown is he made a second mistake that cost him, but he has shown that he has the beating of him, most definitely.
And do you believe he will fight his way? You obviously do as his trainer, you do, but that essentially by winning a world title, defending it, having impressive names on his resume, that might force him back into the position where a trilogy fight makes sense?
No, like I said, I said the public would make their mind up, and that's what I'm going to stick to. If he comes back here with a world title, the public might demand him and Carl before they demand him and James.
Yeah.
So everyone's talking about 3 or 4 different fights for George. So I think George is in a good position where he can choose which one makes more sense for him.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for your time today, Paddy. Really appreciate it.
All right,
and obviously best of luck for Saturday.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Thank you.